Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman, ready for another fun Salute Your Sports. Going to be an awesome show. Plenty of NFL talk. Ravens and Jaguars fighting for the number one seed in the AFC.
Just like we predicted.
Right? Those are things that maybe we didn't quite think would happen in the good old NFL. The Lions are good. Browns are decent. It's kind of a weird season, Tom. We'll focus in specifically on the Jaguars and Ravens. Are those teams a legitimate threat for the one seed? Are they a legitimate threat to make the AFC Championship game? And I'm going to need better than 50% odds when we get there. Not like they could do it. Yeah, they're 6-2, 7-2. Sure, they could do it. Will they do it? We'll be talking about that. Speaking of teams, are they legit? Are they not? I still don't know if I have an answer to this question. You and I will talk about it in a little bit. The Miami Dolphins are 6-3. They are 0-3 against the quote-unquote good teams in the NFL, whatever that means. We were talking about whether they're a fluke or not. With that said, they're 6-3. That is one game better than the Buffalo Bills, who, if the season ends today, are not in the playoffs. Will Buffalo get back on track? Will they make the playoffs? We'll see. Big game this week. Speaking of getting back on track, 49ers, Jaguars, both teams coming off a bye. Who's going to win that massive showdown? Can San Fran get back on track? That'll be a good game to talk about. College football playoff rankings week 2, not much changed. I do want to focus in specifically on the one-loss teams this week. One-loss teams that we think might be able to sneak in to the college football playoff. We got betting locks, sports trivia, statements of the week, all that and more, Tom. Cannot wait to get started. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic as we're getting into the show. And it's really interesting as we're getting this far into the NFL season. Like you said, our first topic, Ravens, Jaguars, both 2-loss teams, both atop the AFC right now. Of course, the third team that's 2 losses and atop the AFC is also the Kansas City Chiefs. But by and large, we expected them to be there. As far as those teams go, the Ravens have been playing very well. I'm going to get into a little bit of the numbers, but number 1 in the NFL in point differential, number 1 in overall team DVOA, and surprisingly, Jacksonville is there as well. So as far as getting the 1 seed, making a deep playoff run, I got to say I'm below 50% on both of these teams, but that's to say I'm below 50% on every team in the AFC as it stands right now. We're looking at a team where, let's see, Jacksonville Jaguars. They lost to the Kansas City Chiefs 17-9 earlier this season, where they had multiple. It could be a tiebreaker, but in that game, they had multiple shots at the end zone and simply converted none of their red zone opportunities into touchdowns in that game. And I know, woulda, coulda, shoulda, in terms of actually getting the results in that one. But that's how close that game was. Is that you're a touchdown instead of a field goal, give or take, away from perhaps winning that game. And we saw even with this Kansas City team against Miami. You talk about, Miami not doing great against the top teams in the league, but Kansas City also didn't necessarily look all that great either, as they've had some uncharacteristically close games. So I'm saying, as far as the 2 teams, I think Baltimore probably is the more likely team to grab that 1 seed between them and Jacksonville, to be clear. Simply because they have a ton of balance. We've seen a couple of games this season where things get so out of hand that they start running out second and third stringers. They've had a couple of really big blowout games. Of course, Seattle this past week, Detroit earlier in the season, a Detroit team that's proving themselves to be pretty legitimate, I would say. Entering the season, it was let's wait and see, let's have them prove it. They've proven that they are a legitimate contending team this year, but I feel like the bar has been lowered on that statement, on that qualifier of a contending team, because we used to think of it coming into the year as, okay, there's Philadelphia, there's San Francisco, there's Kansas City. Maybe if you want to put Buffalo and Cincinnati in there, I think those were the 5 teams at the top that we said, these are the Super Bowl contenders. Yeah. They've been diluted down, and we've got this big glom now of teams. So I think between the 2, like I said, because they're so good on both sides of the ball, they've got a great head coach in John Harbaugh. Not to scoff at Doug Peterson, who also has a Super Bowl title.
Doug is great too.
He's pretty great too. I think that I mean, I just trust Baltimore a little bit more than Jacksonville right now. I mean, Jacksonville has had some pretty good wins, if we want to use that as, some sort of standard to say how good they've been. But I mean, losing to the Texans shows that this division isn't a pushover either. And looking at their schedule ahead, there's tough matchups. I mean, we might get our answer in week, what is it, where the Ravens and the Jaguars are facing off against each other. It's
Yep, head
in
to
late
head.
December, the 17th. That's going to be a really big deciding game. And that one's going to be, luckily for Jacksonville, in Jacksonville, where it's a little bit warmer for them to play. They don't have to go up into that Baltimore weather. So, yeah, I'm going to say Baltimore's more likely. But if you were to say, hey, is any team above a 50% chance in your estimation of grabbing that one seed, getting that crucial bye? I can't put that on anybody right now because nobody is head and shoulders above anybody else.
I agree about the part that nobody's head and shoulders above everybody else. I also agree with the part that you said that some of those top 5 teams you labeled, all those teams have been a little bit worse than we expected. Some of those other teams a little bit better. With that said, I think there's a better than 50% chance the Chiefs get it. I mean, they've been there, done that. They're 7-2. They have one non-conference loss. They actually only have one conference loss. That's crucial when it comes to tiebreakers. They already have the head-to-head win against the Jaguars, by the way. The Ravens play in the AFC North, which is the best division in football, so that makes their schedule pretty tough. Kansas City Chiefs, Tom, I say about 60 to 70% chance to get the 1 seed. That's I think they're pretty set on. Baltimore, actually, a lot of the offseason talk coming in was, Lamar Jackson has some weapons, Zay Flowers, OBJ, Mark Andrews is there. It's not to say that those guys haven't played well, because they have, although their running game has been even better. But the biggest reason why Baltimore is 7-2 is the defense. They are currently second in the league in yards per game allowed and first in the league in points per game allowed, as in the least points allowed in the entire NFL. So that's kind of Baltimore Raven football to me. Maybe I'm stuck in the old days of Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. But when I think of the Baltimore Ravens, I think of defense. I think of a team that can stop you on defense. And you look at what they've done the last 4 or 5 years, their defense has been pretty bad. So then they added a few pieces, but more in all, they just kind of figured it out, right? I mean, this defense wasn't very good last year or the year before that. And all of a sudden, right now, this is the best defense in the league, just barely ahead of the Chiefs, by the way, which is the second best defense in the league. Not the Niners, not the Eagles, not the Bills, these teams you expect. It's the Ravens and the Chiefs are the 2 best defensive teams in the league. And probably the third
Cleveland
might be
would
the
like
Browns.
a word.
Browns
say
is up there too.
I'd put Browns maybe even better. I'd say Browns are probably best in the league.
Browns
and it doesn't
weird,
feel
though.
that way because their offense isn't that great. But I think the Browns are the best
But
defense.
the Browns, I disagree, because the Browns are a defense that I know they're allowing the least yards, but they're not clutch in the red zone. They're giving up, considerably more points than the Chiefs and Ravens. But either way, first, second, or third, those are all teams we unexpected there. So give a lot of credit to Baltimore. I don't really trust Baltimore in close games, to be honest with you. And I know you love DVOA, you love point differential. I think when it comes to seeding and winning, point differential is overrated. You know who's got one of the best point differentials? The Buffalo Bills. They're 5-4. They always have one of the best point differentials, Tom, every year. And they never make a run in the playoffs. Come on now. I think it's something to be said about winning the close games. Lamar Jackson, as good as he is not good in the fourth quarter. He has not been good in the fourth quarter. They actually should be 9-0. Their 2 losses they could have won, especially the game against Pittsburgh. They threw that one away completely. So when it comes to trust, I don't have any trust in Baltimore in the close games. When it comes to trust, Jacksonville, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know they're better, Tom. But then again, you talk about the schedule. Who have they beat? They beat the Bills, who, again, any given Sunday, they can drop an egg at any time. So Jacksonville hasn't beaten very many good teams. I'm not saying the Ravens and the Jaguars aren't good. They're obviously very good. But you tell me who are my 2 favorites in the AFC right now, it's definitely the Chiefs and the Bengals, because they've been there, done that. They're playing great football. And I do want to say this about Miami. We're talking about them struggling. We'll have that in an upcoming segment. in the modern NFL, you also cannot discount wins. There's no such thing as a guaranteed win. Maybe I'm a little biased because that was my preseason pick to the AFC title game, but I think the Dolphins are still a better team. They get A-Chain back. They get Jalen Ramsey figured out in that secondary. I think that the Ravens and Jaguars right now are not even in my top 3 teams in the AFC. I think their records are a little bit better than they would be. I know Jacksonville has a chance to get a top 3 seed because the AFC South is a little bit weaker, although I got to say the Houston Texans and C.J. Stroud, 470 pass yards, rookie record, 5 passing touchdowns. We got to get him on an upcoming segment on this show because the guy is balling out. That AFC South isn't quite as much of a pushover as we thought. As far as Jacksonville, a bit easier schedule than the Ravens. They still play the Bengals, Ravens, and Niners, though. And then you look at who Baltimore has to play. Jaguars, Niners, Dolphins, Chargers. So that's pretty tough. That is a pretty tough schedule for them. So AFC is wide open. I do agree there's not one team that is clearly above the rest. But to me, Kansas City Chiefs, bye week this week. They're second in scoring defense. They've had some offensive issues, but they're still in the top half in yards. They're still in the top half in points. Like, people are acting as if the Kansas City Chiefs are averaging 17 points a game. It's not that the offense has been bad per se for a normal team. They're just bad for Kansas City standards. And again, I've talked about it ad nauseum. It's about finishing drives. Kansas City's yardage totals are not that far off of what we've seen. So you're telling me the Chiefs are 7-2, and we have yet to see the best from their offense. They have a bye week with Andy Reid. I think they got to be the 1 seed every single year. They're the 1 seed right now. And by the way, KC has 3 really tough games left: the Bills, the Bengals, and they have the Eagles. What do those 3 games have in common? They're at home. They're at Arrowhead Stadium. Realistic record for those 3 games, 2-1 for the Chiefs. If they go 2-1 in those 3 games, then they run the table, which Kansas City has 1 bad game against a bad team every year. 1. Very rarely is it 2, Tom. They got rid of the bad game against the Broncos. They lose only 1 more game the rest of the year. They're getting the 1 seed. Simple as that. Sure. I still don't trust Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence. You know, these guys, I want to see them win these playoff games. I want to see these teams win the playoff games, Tom. You got to prove it to me. Who has proven it to me? Kansas City, Cincinnati. Those are the favorites out in the AFC. That's who I've got out there as the favorites. I don't think the Ravens and Jaguars, they're that next tier for me. I do put them behind Kansas City and Cincinnati for me, for sure.
All right. So you're definitely with the Chiefs taking that number 1 seed for me. I'm pretty much operating with the field. I don't really have a favorite particularly on that one. But you mentioned the Dolphins in the last segment and how they've been performing this season. And the way that the question is phrased, are they a fluke team or are they legit?
Let me preface that again.
Sure.
Like, do you think they can make the AFC title game? Not is it possible? Like, is it likely? Are they going to be a top 3 seed? Like, can they beat one of these winning teams in the playoffs? And I mean, make a run for them. Like, they got to win minimum 1 playoff game with what they've done to be okay. Can they win 2 playoff games? Can they win 2 playoff games?
I mean, can they? Sure.
Odds of them winning 2 playoff games?
I don't think so. Like, the way that I had the answer developed for this question, the way it was phrased, is that if the concept of fluke or legit depends entirely on what you thought of them coming into the season. For
I thought highly.
Since you had, you thought highly. Wild card team that's going to be a wild card borderline division winner, because I know we were both kind of like, oh, Miami, Buffalo, where do we want to go? I think we both ultimately went Buffalo with our preseason pick on that one. But I mean, you have Miami making the AFC Championship game. I mean, I have them in the playoffs. So for me, I think that they are a legitimate playoff team. I don't necessarily know if fluke is the right answer, because I think we can look at their wins that they've had this season, and let's consider, part of what makes up such a big point differential for them is putting up a plus 50 point differential against the Denver Broncos, putting up a 21 point differential against the Carolina Panthers, putting up against the Giants at 15. So you get what I'm saying? We're like, they put up these big numbers against not great teams. But then when we see them play, I mean, yeah, they got blown out in Buffalo earlier in the season. Again, on the road against Philadelphia, but played Kansas City pretty close on a neutral site. So it's one of those things where this kind of slots into where I figured they would be at this point throughout the season. I'm checking really quickly if I had, not a great look. I had the Jets over the Dolphins in the playoffs. Of course,
which
Aaron
that
Rodgers,
could very much be a fact if Rodgers was healthy.
That could be the difference. Yeah. But I mean, this is, they were right on the edge for me for winning the division and then being a playoff team. I just thought that their division was going to be a lot tougher. And granted, again, Aaron Rodgers, alternate universe type of stuff there. But I think this is pretty much where they should be. This is what their high water mark. Now, they have the opportunities to try to show that they can break through. I mean, they've got a matchup in Baltimore on New Year's Eve, where that's going to be a significant matchup for them, not just necessarily as a measuring stick game, but literally for playoff implications and seeding, because then they close the season at home against Buffalo. And also, let's throw in a Christmas Eve game against the Dallas Cowboys as well. So they've got a soft-ish part of the schedule coming up here. They're going to have a couple games against the Jets that could go either way based on how that Jets defense is playing. And then it's just a matter of offense. Well, it's a matter of, what the offense for the Jets can do against the Dolphins, because the Dolphins defense has shown that they're not an especially strong unit. I mean, we talk about the Chiefs and finishing drives and everything. I mean, the Chiefs clearly are not as good as we are used to them being. Still pretty good, but I'd say if we were to pick a better offense just on overall firepower, I mean, I'd pick the Eagles' offense. I would pick Buffalo's offense as being stronger components than what the Chiefs have. They have Mahomes and Kelsey, and everything beyond that kind of iffy. I mean, I guess you could put Buffalo right in the same range there as well. Like,
Allen and Diggs,
that's splitting hairs. I think.
I do agree. The Eagles probably better offense overall.
I think that Miami is a legit playoff contender. I don't think that they're necessarily a title contender, and they could go on a run and surprise to make it to the championship game. But I have them toward the bottom of that glommed up tier of Kansas City, Baltimore, Cincinnati, as just three teams off the top of my head that if we're going head to head, I'd rather have them than the Miami Dolphins, quite frankly. So for me, legit, but on a different scale. The real question, I mean, comes for you in your opinion of, do you think that they're still a legitimate AFC title contender, or are they coming in a peg below as, okay, they can win a game or two in the playoffs, they can get through the wild card round, but can they make it all the way to the championship round?
Yeah. So the honest truth is, I don't know for sure. I know we like to make predictions here, but again,
would you say more above or below 50? Yeah.
Let me put Radar in the other room.
No, you're good.
Radar, come on, buddy. Come on, Radar. Get you guys out. I think you guys are warm. Come on, go Radar. This guy. I'm going to start him in the other room next week, see how that goes. All right. So back to the Dolphins. Radar was wanting to get out. This guy, I think it's just a little warm in here for him with the lights and everything. We fixed our heating, though, sort of. But I'll tell you more off air on that.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, so it's hard to know. Man, we've got the stats, Tom. And we've got these stats. They lost 31-17 to the Eagles, 48-20 to the Bills, 21-14 against the Chiefs. Blow out the Panthers, the Giants, the Broncos. One thing to think about, though, is all of these losses against the good teams. Road loss in Buffalo, road loss in Philadelphia, foreign game in Germany, which, again, who knows how you react to the jet lag. That game could be a little funky, of course. And I'll counter this because everyone's down on them. If you want to reason it out a little bit, a little cause for some hope for Miami. get clobbered against the Bills. The Philadelphia score, they deserved to lose. I'm not saying they didn't, but it was 17-17 in the fourth quarter. I mean, this game was close most of the way. It was just a really, really bad fourth quarter. So, again, I think that 31-17 score was a little bit not indicative of the game as a whole. The Kansas City game, 21-14. I know they were down 21-0, tail of two halves. But I look at it, they played 2 bad quarters against the Chiefs, 1 bad quarter against the Eagles. It's not like that they got completely dominated by either of those teams. I know they lost, but again, road games, tough conditions. That again, that's the side of things that maybe people aren't looking at that I just want people to consider. Now, does it sound like I make an excuse for them? Yes, it does. They are still 0-3 in these games. They still got to find a way to beat a good team. Their schedule was really easy except for those last 3 weeks you mentioned. You look at Baltimore, you look at the Cowboys and the Bills. I also think, though, Jalen Ramsey coming back is massive for them. Getting Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, they actually did look pretty decent against the Chiefs, those 2 guys playing together in the secondary. Mahomes had a season low in passing yards, 185. That's the lowest he's had this season, among the lowest he's had in his career. Miami's defense actually, Tom, looked really good against Kansas City. Don't forget that one of Kansas City's touchdowns was that kind of fluke play, the Tyreek Hill fumble. I mean, great defensive play, no doubt, but I look at it, fumbles are a little bit fluky unless you're the same guys fumbling every time. So they were a fumble away from that being a tie game. So just something to think about. Again, maybe it's me picking them to be, in the AFC title game. I think they are for real. Now, I'm a little cause for concern. I had them in the AFC title game. Part of the reason why I picked that, though, you know this very well, is that I don't want to pick Chiefs Bengals 3 years in a row. So, in my heart of hearts, I would have picked Chiefs Bengals. As far as my pick, I threw Miami in there just to have a little fun, make it a little different. So I guess I'm backtracking a little bit. I feel a little bit better about Cincinnati now, which is weird because they're only 5-3, but obviously
there's a lot of context there.
Obviously, Joe Burrow's healthy now.
Yeah.
Obviously, things have changed a lot. So I actually like Miami, Tom. I actually like their odds. I think they are for real. They are going to have to answer that question. If they lose all 3 against Buffalo, Baltimore, and Dallas, then I'd be like, okay, okay, they can't beat the good teams. They did beat Buffalo last year, by the way. Keep that. I know Buffalo's had their number the last few years, but they did beat Buffalo last year, and they played them tough in their losses. So I like Miami. Vic Fangio's a great defensive coordinator. I know their defense hasn't looked great, but what happens when there's a new team, a new system? It takes a little bit of time. I know everyone wants it to work out right away, but you look at who are their 2 best defensive players. Xavier Howard has missed a little bit of time with injury. Jalen Ramsey has been almost out the whole season. Getting those 2 guys together in your secondary makes a massive, massive difference. So I would pump the brakes on Miami's defense isn't very good. Let's see how good they are when their 2 best players are healthy together on both sides of the cornerbacks, because that duo is pretty nasty, Tom. I think teams are going to have a harder time, as we saw Kansas City, their lowest pass total of the season when they have Ramsey and Howard both out there. So I actually think the Dolphins are not a fluke. I think they're for real, and I think they will win 2 playoff games, right? Because it's they win 2 playoff games in the AFC title game, right? Assuming they're a wild card team. So at least 1, maybe 2, depending on the matchup, depending on things. But I do have them in my upper echelon of contenders, and I do have them ahead of the Ravens and Jaguars. I know, call me biased, adopt the team Miami. I love their playmakers. Fine. I love what they can do on offense. It's a very good team, and I think their defense is going to be much, much, much improved come season's end.
I just worry about Tua as a fourth quarter quarterback, and those 3 losses, no points in the fourth quarter against the Eagles, the Chiefs, or the the Buffalo Bills.
A lot of quarterbacks and teams have no fourth quarter points against those three teams, by the way, Tom. So maybe they won't even need the fourth quarter points.
In the playoffs, they will definitely need the fourth quarter points.
They might be up, baby. Miami. Pack your bags.
See.
Playoff run. Let's go, Dolphins, baby.
Well, a team that's going to need to pack up a lot of other things before they make a playoff run is the Buffalo Bills, a team that, despite having the second best point differential in the NFL, a team that is fifth in overall team DVOA, somehow is 5-4 on the season. And if the playoffs were to start today, the Buffalo Bills would find themselves in a disappointing position on the outside looking in. I mean, we can take a quick look at the schedule and see how they got to this point, but really it is about what's going to happen going forward. This team is such an anomaly, such an enigma, how they are so good on a number of both traditional and more advanced analytical fronts, where we can look at the numbers and say this should be a really good team, and yet the results do speak for themselves with road loss in Cincinnati, road loss in New England, road loss against the Jets to start the season, and then a loss overseas in London against the Jaguars. It puts them in a pretty bad spot when you consider those are all AFC losses, 2 divisional losses. So, Kamen, looking at their schedule coming up, just going to fly through this really quickly. They get a pretty easy matchup against the Broncos to try to get themselves back on track, but then they have to host the Jets. Then they're traveling to Philadelphia, traveling to Kansas City, hosting Dallas, hosting the LA Chargers, or sorry, on the road for the LA Chargers. Got a game at home against the Patriots. And then again, they're on the road in Miami to close out the season. So it certainly feels like if the Buffalo Bills are going to make the playoffs, they're going to have to earn every single one. None of these games are gimmies, except, like I said, the Broncos at home this week. So 50% coin flip. Which side are you taking? That the Bills definitely will make the playoffs, or do you think it's a less than 50% chance and that the Bills are going to be a surprising out and not in the postseason, considering that we both have them as division winners, or failing that, wild card teams?
Yeah, look, Tom, I don't obsess with this point differential thing that you do. I really think it's not necessarily indicative of, what a team can do winning wise, because I think sometimes clutch play, close games, that's where you separate the really good teams and the great teams. To be a great team, you got to be able to win the close games. Buffalo's had issues with that. So, yes, at their very best, they are maybe the best or second best team in the league. I mean, I don't really care about the schedule, because Buffalo has shown me more than any team in the NFL, at least the regular season, last few years. A, they can beat anybody. B, they can lose against anybody. They lose to Kansas City in the playoffs, but the last few regular season outings, they've beaten the Chiefs. They've beaten Kansas City in the regular season. They've beaten these really good teams. Then they've had a loss like the Patriots, the 2-win Patriots. They had a loss against the Jets without Aaron Rodgers. I look at them as their team that could beat anybody and a team that could lose to anybody. So I think more of any of the contenders out there, I wouldn't get too caught up on the schedule. It doesn't matter who they play. It really does not matter. They need to play their game. They play their game, they'll be in the playoffs. It's 50-50. I'll lean to get in just because I think they're too talented not to. They're not far off. They're only a couple games off. I mean, I look at, let's just assume that, they're actually only a game back in the division, and they have the head-to-head win against Miami. So the division actually is not fully out of reach.
Nope.
So that's a possibility. Now, the Bengal loss really hurts them because Cincinnati, in all likelihood, is going to be a wild card team, given how far the Ravens are right now. So they will lose a head-to-head tiebreaker against Cincinnati if they're the same record. That one stung. One we both predicted, by the way. We did really good last week. Chiefs.
We did.
Chiefs, both of us had them winning. We had Philly and we had Cincinnati in those 3 massive, massive games. it's just, it's so weird and so frustrating. There's just something about Josh Allen, man. You know how obsessed I am with stats, how much I love stats. And he actually has the best stats right now of any quarterback. You look at
Mm-hmm.
QBR, you look at passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, and he doesn't even have, like, he has a decent amount of picks, but not a crazy amount. It just seems like it's always at the wrong moment. I don't know what it is, Tom, and it feels like it always affects his team. Like Mahomes throws a pick, gets a turnover, forget about it. Kansas City is back, and they're okay. When Josh Allen throws a pick, it just seems to be this draining moment in every game. And when does he throw picks? In the close games. Like, yeah, it's easy. You don't throw a pick when you're up like 30 points, but it's just something about it. Like, he should be the number 2 quarterback in the league, no question. He should be closer to Mahomes than the
Mm-hmm.
other guys are to him. Like, you look at who he is, Josh Allen, he's the second most talented quarterback probably of all time behind Patrick Mahomes. Pure talent, throwing ability, running
Mm-hmm.
ability, athleticism. I mean, it's probably Mahomes, Allen, and Rodgers. That's it. I think if I'm looking at the most talented players to play the position, everything they can do at that slot, all the throws they can make. And Josh Allen is not in that same pantheon as Mahomes and Rodgers, and he's never going to be. And statistically, he might be close, Tom. And I love stats, but stats don't tell the story with the Bills. I do not trust them one bit in the playoffs. 3-4 games in a row of consistent football, not a chance, Tom. They're not
Mm-hmm.
making any playoff run. They're one of the least likely teams in the AFC to make a playoff run. With that said, over a 17-game season, there is so much good about this team that over 17 games, it would surprise me if they don't make the playoffs. It really would. By the way, James Cook in the backfield has provided a running back this year. Their running game is better. But forget the Josh Allen stuff. It's the Buffalo Bills defense. Statistically, they're always amazing. What happens in the playoffs when they face Mahomes? They can't stop him in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
They don't stop Joe Burrow in the playoffs. The defense goes in hibernation mode. I don't know if this is a culture thing. I don't want to say that it is. No, but like, why? It's both sides of the ball, Tom. I mean, they made Mac Jones look really, really good at points in that Patriots game. It's not just Josh Allen. I don't know if it's a focus thing, but it's just very, very strange what we see with Buffalo. Because statistically, they were such a good defense the last few years, and in the playoffs, the Dolphins' third string quarterback looked great against them in the playoffs. You know, Patrick Mahomes only needs his 13 seconds against them in the playoffs. It's like everything that they know how to do, it's like it all gets forgotten come playoff time, gets forgotten in random games. And we've been seeing this for 3-4 years now, Tom. It's not just 1 year. This year, by the way, is very similar to the season they had, I think, like 3 years ago, the year they made the AFC title game. They were like 5-4 at one point in the season, rattled off a bunch of wins, make the playoffs, make the AFC title game, and lose. And I think they get in the playoffs based on sheer talent alone. But the DVOA, the point differentials, throw it out the window. I mean, when these guys are rolling, they're rolling. But when they're not, they're not. And they don't roll enough times. So I'm sorry, Buffalo. I don't think they're anywhere near winning the Super Bowl. They are talent-wise probably the best team in the AFC. They'll make the playoffs. They'll probably be the 6th or 7th most likely team to make the Super Bowl. I have zero confidence in Buffalo as a Super Bowl contender, Tom.
Yeah, I'm right with you there as far as not really trusting them as a Super Bowl contending team. I think playoffs are still well within their reach because, as you said, they're the first team out, so to speak, to use a little bit of Joe Lenardi terms.
March
And
Madness.
I mean, like, they need a little bit of help. No, not help. They have their destiny in their hands because their biggest issues are they need wins in the division, wins in the conference, and they've got a decent amount of those opportunities in front of them. Especially when you consider they've got the Patriots and Dolphins one time apiece, and then the Jets, or they have the Jets again for a single time because they faced off earlier in the season. So it's up to them really to decide, okay, are we actually going to make a run? Are we actually going to make it into the playoffs this season? And like I said, they're going to have to earn their way in. It's going to be interesting to see what they do at Arrowhead in mid-December. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in Miami, as that could be a game that literally determines the division. I think Miami's probably good enough. I think their schedule's probably soft enough that they're able to pick up a little extra breathing room, so to speak, heading into that matchup. But I mean, that's going to be pretty significant as far as that goes. So I'm going to say that the Bills are likely to make it. If it's above or below that 50% threshold, I'm more than 50% confident that the Bills will be able to make it. But that opinion certainly can change. Like I said, relatively easy game against the Denver Broncos coming up, but it's just going to be teams that are at least good on one side of the ball. I know that the Jets didn't look great on offense against the Chargers, but their defense is pretty solid throughout the season.
Denver's getting better, Tom. They're getting better on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, but I think that's a pretty clear difference. I think that's a pretty stark
They're better
difference.
than the Patriots. The Bills beat the Patriots. Or lost to the Patriots, rather.
I would put the Patriots and the Broncos in a similar class of just meh, of just not good.
Broncos are 3-5, Tom. 3-5. They just beat the
good.
Chiefs.
They're not good. Moving on to the Jaguars and the 49ers as a significant matchup is we've got, like you said, the Jaguars, a 2-loss team. They are vying for the number 1 seed out in the NFC. 49ers looking to do the same. Both teams coming off of a bye. So, Kamen, we've seen kind of like the best of San Francisco to start the season, but then they sputtered of late. So with both of these teams coming off the bye, do you think it's more likely that the 49ers are going to get back on track? They have an opportunity to get healthy. They've had an opportunity to look at some film because what it kind of feels like the league is maybe not necessarily figured out Brock Purdy per se, but they've definitely said, okay, we're going to stop you from doing the things you want. Do you think that the 49ers are developing a good counter, that Brock Purdy's learning to counter and be a successful quarterback? Because let's keep in mind, he hasn't really even started a full NFL season, or I think he's right there as far as the total number of games goes. And then conversely, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, do you think that they're going to start putting things together coming out of the bye? Because they also started off, they're 6-2, but they haven't necessarily looked great for any big stretch.
Yeah, so obviously I think with Brock Purdy, there's the first 2 words that come to mind for me, and I think we still need a little bit more of it, and you hinted at it. Can you guess what 2 words I'm thinking right now?
Sample size.
Oh, good job, Tom Casselman, for 500 on Jeopardy. I think if we want to be 100% sure on Brock Purdy, we need a little bit more sample size. So anything I say, take it with a grain of salt. That is definitely a very, very important thing. I've been high on Brock Purdy personally for a while now. I think one of the things, like what makes the Denver Nuggets so good, they have the clear defined roles. It goes Jokic and Murray. What happened when Murray was banged up, a few years ago? They weren't in the finals. They didn't win the championship. I think the most underrated player in the NFL right now, the most underappreciated player in the league, there's 2 guys I think that come to mind, but one of them is Deebo Samuel. You look at Deebo Samuel when he was healthy 2 years ago. Receiving yards, he was 4th in the league in receiving yards. Not on a passing team, by the way. 49ers are not a passing team. You look at all-purpose yards, rushing and receiving combined, he was 3rd in the league, behind only Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor that season. I know he was the guy that year. I know his stats may have been slightly inflated because they used him a lot, but I lean more on the other side of things. Deebo Samuel is that good. His numbers have dipped because he's been hurt and because they've reintroduced Ayuk to be a bigger part of the offense. They've added McCaffrey to take away some of his touches. But the Niners offense with and without Deebo Samuel is massively different. That Bengals game, no Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, the last 3 weeks, either has not played or he's played a little bit or he's played injured. The 3 losses San Francisco has, it's been without a Debo Samuel. It just makes it so much easier because you have McCaffrey, you have Debo, you have Ayuk, you have Kittle. They don't really have a third wide receiver. They don't. If Ayuk is the only threat on the outside, the only guy that can, beat you with speed on the outside, because Kittle's not necessarily a speed guy, it just completely changes the roles and the dynamics. And Debo, again, is a guy that they can use in so many ways. He's like McCaffrey. He can run, he can throw. They can use him in the short game. They can throw it deep. There are two guys that are very, very hard to account for. When you have two guys like that versus having one guy like that, it completely changes the dynamic. So I think part of why Brock Purdy has struggled is Debo Samuel. I think you and I agree, we call it the tiers of quarterbacks and the win with, win because of, win despite. I would say the vast majority of quarterbacks are, I would say about at least 20 to 25 of the quarterbacks in the league are in that middle ground. I think you've got your very, very best guys who are just amazing. No matter what, they'll find a way to win, deliver like Mahomes. Then you've got your guys like Desmond Ridder who are just really bad, period, no matter what. But the vast majority of the quarterbacks in the NFL fit in that, scenario of you give them a good system, they're going to be really good. You don't give them a good system, they'll be really bad. We've seen that with Geno Smith. Geno Smith was really, really bad when he was on really, really bad systems. He's in a really, really good system. Guess what? He's really, really good. So Brock Purdy, we talk about being in a really good system all this time. Well, that system just got considerably worse without Debo Samuel, who is a massive X factor. By the way, the other most underrated player in the league is A.J. Brown, second in receiving yards. So I think Debo Samuel, A.J. Brown are two guys, Tom, that I have much higher than anyone else does in the NFL when we're talking about best receivers, best playmakers. With that said, Brock Purdy has just had some turnovers too, Tom. It's not like he hasn't moved the ball at all. I think the Browns game was really bad because McCaffrey got hurt, but it was tough weather conditions. I know, he just did not have it that game. But you look at the Viking game, you look at the Bengal game especially, they were moving the ball against the Bengals. They just had turnovers. And what is it we like to say? Regression to the mean. Brock Purdy had so few turnovers his first, X amount of games that he was almost playing even better than he is. He was due to have a game like that. Well, I mean, he's human. He's human. He was due to have a game like that.
Well, and it's less about it's more about we see the lack of his arm talent per se and leading into turnovers, because there were some games earlier in the season. We've seen some throws last season too, where it's George Kittle, for example, playing defensive back almost and knocking away an interception. It's simply that against the Bengals, against the Vikings, those interceptions converted, so to speak. So it's one of those things where when we talk about regression to the mean, it's more about luck is too strong of a word as far as
not throwing it right to these guys, though. Some of these against the Bengals, he threw right to them. So I'm not buying so much the arm strength thing.
I mean, there's bad ball rates.
Tom,
there's other metrics you can look into for that sort of thing. It's a
bye week. They're going to get back on track. 49ers have a better defense than the Jaguars. I was going to say they have a better running back, but there's probably one of the few running backs better than Etienne is McCaffrey.
Yeah.
They have, I know the Jaguars have some good weapons. The Niners' weapons are even better. I think San Francisco is a better team. Trevor Lawrence, okay, maybe he's a better quarterback than Brock Purdy, but San Francisco's a better team.
He definitely is.
But I think that the Niners are going to win better as a team. I think the Jaguars are a very good team, but I haven't seen them get enough of these big wins. They haven't had enough of these big wins, and you can see it. What does Vegas know? San Francisco on the road is a 3-point favorite, Tom. So, okay, they got the better quarterback, but who's got the better team? I like the Niners in this game.
Me too.
I think the Niners get back on track. They're better off having this bad stretch at this point than they are having it at the end of the year. Better off getting these injuries now. Although, again, how much of it is a fluke? How much of it is a bad luck? Or what is going on inside the Niner training systems, the doctors? I hate to say that because it may be pure luck, but why is it that the Niners keep having these injuries to these players? Are they doing enough? Do they need to look at certain scenarios?
It's luck.
You
It's
think it's
purely.
luck?
I think
Purely
it's
luck?
bad luck. It's
Okay.
they play football. Everybody gets banged up at some point. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think there's any training or anything that would say that, oh, Brock Purdy like tore his UCL type of thing. Like that's just an
Right.
unlucky thing when he tore. And it's the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance. Like the quarterback position alone, they've had really a bad luck, and they've happened to find a way out of it, so to speak. With Brock Purdy, I mean, I think we're a missed field goal away from talking about they had a narrow victory over the Browns in what would have been a tough win that they would have gotten, but certainly you'd want them to play better in that scenario. So just like how much of this is also on their kicking game, because they drafted this Jake Moody guy to be their kicker, and we've seen not converting necessarily on
I
some
think
of
he
these kicks.
missed against the Vikings too, which makes those last drives different too.
Exactly. So, as far as how good of a team San Francisco is, I think that they're still really good. I think they've hit an unlucky stretch, a bad stretch, because we talk about Deebo Samuel out. Trent Williams has also missed some time. He's also played
Yeah,
hurt.
big lineman.
And if you want to talk about underrated, I mean, it doesn't get much more underrated than being on the offensive line, and he is crucial to
And
that
they're getting
offense.
Chase Young, by the way, which helps Nick Bosa in the pass rush. They added Chase
Exactly.
Young on the trade deadline, who, if healthy, is one of the best pass rushers in football. Already have a top 3 or 4 pass rusher in Bosa on the team. So it's kind of like the rich got richer at the trade deadline.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be a tough matchup for Jacksonville, because even though they've got a pretty good team, a pretty decent squad, by all accounts, one of their biggest issues is offensive line. And that's something that is really difficult to mask over, especially when you're facing a defensive front that is dangerous, quite frankly.
Yeah.
This is a defensive line that can really put a hurting on you, because they are great at getting to the passer, not just with Bosa and Young, but also Javon Hargrave up the middle as a defensive tackle. He is quite disruptive as well. So I like San Francisco in this game. I think that even as they're sitting as the 3rd seed right now, and currently they're kind of a distant third to the 8-1 Philadelphia Eagles, the 6-2 Detroit Lions, I don't think the 49ers, just with this bad stretch, are going to be getting that first round bye, but I'm not really diminishing their talent all that much.
I still got Tom. I still got Philadelphia and San Francisco in the NFC. I just don't see anyone else really. Like I think Philadelphia right now is ahead of them, but I think San Francisco is my number 2 team in the NFC. Personally, no question.
With Detroit having a relatively light schedule down the stretch, I could see them being at home, and they're pretty dangerous there. But
I like the Niners on the road. I agree with you. Detroit will get the 2 seed. I think the Niners can beat them.
Maybe
in
the
Detroit.
1.
Yeah,
maybe the 1 seed. We'll see. So I think that on talent, I'm with you still. Philadelphia, San Francisco atop. Detroit, with the right situation, can throw their hat in the ring. And then it feels like there's a pretty big gap the rest of the way. But of course, plenty of NFL season to go for these teams to kind of shake out who is going to be falling where along the playoff seeding. And with 7 teams getting in, it's going to be really interesting to see. We still have a lot of teams that are in the hunt, as we're going to see on graphics on CBS and Fox and NBC, and I guess Prime as well, going throughout the season. But playoffs are a bit tighter in the college football season. As I looked at the rankings, I was like, hang on, let me make sure I have this right. And I clicked back between, the 2 different weeks. It's like,
it's the same.
No change atop the playoff rankings there. So really, I think the more interesting discussion, and you put it in the show rundown, is talking about the 1-loss teams. It's going to be kind of boring talking about the teams that are currently in right now, because their resumes are fairly ironclad. I'm not going to rehash the discussion that we had last week as far as talking about that, but we do have an opportunity now to look at Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Penn State, even Louisville and Ole Miss as 1-loss teams, and kind of talk about, which 1-loss team has the best chance to get into the college football playoff. And I mean, I'm just going to jump in right off the bat and eliminate 2 teams. I'm going to eliminate Penn State, and I'm going to eliminate Louisville, simply because, I mean,
you might as well eliminate Ole Miss, because they're going to lose to Georgia this week. They have the path if they beat Georgia, but they're falling to Georgia this week. Well, that's the thing. So I know they got the path, but can they do it? Not a chance. They're falling against Georgia. Bye-bye, Rebels.
So for Ole Miss, there's a path. For me, I don't see a path really for Louisville unless several dominoes fall their way as far
Yeah.
as teams ahead them losing. And then kind of the same thing with Penn State. Even if they beat Michigan, they would need Michigan to beat Ohio State to have like any. I think they have like a very slim to none chance of making it to the Big Ten title game. Which, if you don't have that on your resume, if it's you against a one-loss Ohio State or against an undefeated
Right. One loss
Ohio
Ohio State.
State,
I was going to say Michigan and Ohio State. One of them's not going to have that on the resume. They can still
right?
get in.
We'll see. I mean, for Penn State, they would need not only to beat Michigan but have Ohio State falter to get in. So I think
And they
that's
need a
too many
passing game,
dominoes.
which they don't have.
Well,
So you
that
can't
too,
win
yes.
without having any passing
That
game.
too. With Ole Miss, I mean, yeah, if they beat Georgia, they absolutely are in a conversation there as far as representing the SEC. But that really leaves, to my mind, Oregon, Texas, and Alabama. And if you want to advocate for any of the teams that I have just kind of dismissed out of hand, feel free to do so. But I really think that this is more of a 3-team conversation than a 6-team conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Could not agree more. Real quick, just as far as the top 4, it's very clear that the committee really likes Ohio State because, again, I disagree with them being first last week. Would have put Georgia. I know our alma mater, Mizzou, won't get the love, but Georgia beat a Mizzou team that is pretty good, Tom Casselman. Meanwhile, I know the score ended up looking good at the end, but Ohio State struggled a lot with a not so good Rutgers team. So I thought they might flip that 1-2, but they didn't. So as far as the other teams, I agree with you. Louisville, Penn State. Again, I'm dismissing Ole Miss because I'm not buying them to beat Georgia. So it is a 3-team race: Texas, Oregon, and Alabama. I think Oregon's probably got the best path because if they run the table, they make the Pac-12 title game. They win the Pac-12 title game. They would, go over Washington. That's where it gets really, really tricky, though. If we have the one loss, Ohio State and Michigan, do they put them in or not over, somebody else that has one loss? Like there's a one-loss Pac-12 champion go over Ohio State or Michigan. It depends on how convincing Oregon is. How convincing is the Michigan-Ohio State winner? The Texas and Alabama one is interesting because Alabama, you look at who Alabama's playing, Tom. They have Kentucky, Chattanooga, and Auburn. Alabama's going to finish undefeated those 3 games. Alabama's going to be in the SEC title game. If they beat Georgia, Alabama's in the football playoff. No questions asked. Even if all those other teams, I really think they would put a one-loss Bama in, even over an undefeated Washington, an undefeated Florida State. They are going to put Alabama in if they knock out Georgia.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
That's gonna. I mean, look, it's hard to argue against it. So Alabama has the path. Georgia doesn't look invincible. Like they're really, really good, but this is, I think we can agree, the worst Georgia team the last 3 years. Alabama's issue, though, is they kind of need Texas to lose because they lost to Texas. That was when they were figuring out the quarterback situation. Jalen Milroe has figured it out. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate. He can pass, he can run. He looks great. So I actually think Texas is going to lose. They were not convincing against Kansas State. I know Ewers has been hurt, their quarterback, but they were up a lot in that game. And the fact that it was so close for comfort, I don't really trust Texas. I mean, they've got the win over Alabama, but I look at Texas, they're going to lose, Tom. That's what I'm looking at. So it's going to go down to Oregon and Alabama for me. And Oregon, again, I think Oregon's better than Washington. They lost a close game on the road. They missed a field goal at the end. They play the game on a neutral field. I think Oregon wins. They play in the Pac-12 title game. Oregon's going to beat Washington.
They might win in overtime.
Exactly. They make the field goal. They might win in overtime. Matter of inches. So it's tough. It is really, really tough. But I think part of what is Alabama is they're Alabama. It's the Alabama Crimson Tide. They have a real chance to do it. They're the last team to beat Georgia, by the way, in the SEC title game a few years ago. And that opens up a whole nother can. What if Bama beats Georgia by a walk-off field goal? Is Bama in? Is Georgia in? Do we do two SEC teams? Do we do this whole thing again?
Probably.
But do they deserve it? Probably. I mean, come on. Florida State is not better than Alabama. I'm sorry, Tom. Florida State's not better than Oregon. The ACC is not very good. So what's going to make it easy for these teams is if Florida State loses a game, they're out. Even as ACC champs, they're out. Their only path is to go undefeated. But then again, if they go undefeated, how can you leave them out? I don't know. It gets really, really tricky. But I really think it's going to be Alabama or Oregon. And just because of how many things are going to happen, we know there's all sorts of upsets, crazy things going on. I'm going to say one of those two teams will be in the playoff. Last week, I was all about Oregon. Now, maybe I'm leaning Bama. I don't know. It's those two to me, though. Something about Texas just isn't feeling right. They haven't looked as good in recent weeks. I'm telling you, the Longhorns are going to lose a game, whether it's later this year, whether it's in the Big 12 title game. Texas is going to lose. Penn State's going to lose. Louisville's going to lose. Ole Miss is going to lose. I don't think Alabama or Oregon lose. It's just a matter of what happens with Florida State. How decisive is the Michigan-Ohio State winner, and what happens in the SEC title game? Because Georgia and Bama, that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun in that SEC title game.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun every time they go around. I mean, I'm pretty much in agreement with you as far as who's going to be, most likely to make. And I put Oregon atop the list simply because I think that, again, they were a tying field goal and some overtime away from having a shot against the Washington Huskies in that loss earlier in the season on the road, mind you, in a tough environment. And looking at the resume, I mean, I know USC is now currently unranked, but that's still going to be a pretty strong win just on name brand value alone. And then again, hosting Oregon State at the end of the season before going into the title game. I think that Oregon, again, this assumes that they have to win the title game just like it does for Alabama as well. I think they have a really, really strong resume for making it in on that front. So I'd say Oregon's my most likely, Alabama's second. Texas, I mean, even if Texas wins out, I know that they had that loss against Oklahoma, which is a rivalry game, and Oklahoma was ranked 12th at the time. It's not a bad loss, but I think, I mean, we know that the CFP committee does not necessarily make rational decisions, and also we know that the transitive property does not really matter in these things. Although you're going to have people carping about, well, how does Alabama as a one-loss team get in over Texas when their one loss was to Texas?
It was earlier in the season.
Well, earlier in the season, that folks are probably going to point to, well, Alabama's undefeated in their conference in the SEC, whereas Texas has that one conference loss. I don't know. You can slice it any number of ways.
A little bit too overrated in this discussion, though, because not every team is perfect. If you look at it, like, for example, like, let's just say Texas loses to someone random in the Big 12. Is your loss against that random team worse than losing head-to-head against a team that is in the same discussion with you? It just doesn't I think the head-to-head matchup is a little bit unfair for me personally. And I think you and I both know one of the most interesting things, this is the same thing when it comes to March Madness time in college hoops, which, by the way, college basketball tipping off this week. That's exciting stuff as well. But it's the age-old talk of how much do we care about early on in the season? You look at the team, like, what is this team right now? Do we look at who this team is now, or do we look at their whole season as a whole? Because the Alabama team struggled earlier this season. They were not very good. Not only in the Texas loss, they had a close game against UAB. It was like a random team they barely beat. They actually benched Jalen Milroe, and then it turns out he was the guy after all. So it's just like Alabama was not even a top 10 team early this season. Right now, Alabama, I mean, they're a top 5 team. No question about it. It's Alabama. I mean, they beat Ole Miss, who was ranked really high. They just went in and beat LSU. They're figuring it out. So That's going to come down to the committee. Do they look at who the best 4 teams are now, or what's the best resume over a whole season? That's a whole different argument, Tom. I don't know where you land on that side, by the way. I know it's a combo of both, but still.
For me, it's resume, and we talk all the time about we want these teams to schedule tough non-conference schedules. Well, if they're going to schedule
Alabama
tough
did
non-conference schedules, and then and they lost to Texas. We're going to ding Texas because they went out. They said we're going to face Alabama. We're going to play them hard at home last year. We're going to beat them by 10 on the road this year. And then we're going to have the committee come in and say, well, that doesn't matter because it happened in, September or whatever. I mean, to me, that's just kind of galling and an unfair double standard when we say.
Yeah, but let me flip that side of it, though. So if Alabama's going to get punished for that tough non-conference game, then what gets them the schedule at the next year? They're going to be like, they punished us for that tough loss in the non-con. We're just not going to worry about it. We're going to schedule only cupcakes next time. It goes both ways, No,
I know, but it's just, to my mind, the winners of these tough early season teams, if we're going to say that Alabama had a good win over LSU, we should say that Florida State had a good win over LSU. And I know that things kind of get figured out throughout the season and then injuries happen and some players get better, some players kind of fall off. But to me, you got to have the resume mean something. It has to mean something. That Oregon had that. No, I'm blanking. Oregon and Ohio State was last season, but to have those early season matchups, I think they have to matter. It's just a matter of how much the CFP is actually going to stand by that when it comes time to make those decisions as the season goes on. But
it's a combination of things. I know you and I very, very philosophically disagree about the playoff system every year because, again, resume has to matter. I can't just say it's the 4 best teams right now. I know that is not, ironclad logic, but I lean more on the side is I look at who are the 4 best teams, are the 4 best teams in, and sometimes someone misses out because the resume is way worse. But if the resumes are fairly close, if it's not 100% clear what resume is better, I look at the eye test. I look at the simple logic of, if these 2 teams played today, who would win? And that's how I pick my top 4. I know it's not how you pick it, Tom, but I think a lot of people talk about the SEC bias, which I don't know that that's necessarily so much true. And if it is, by the way, they win the national champion is SEC almost every year. But I think a lot of times, sure, the committee thinks about who's going to draw the most fans. But I think sometimes these guys sit down and think to themselves, who would win in a matchup of these 2 teams? Then if you think to yourself, well, Alabama would win, Georgia would win, then you got to put them in if it's close. If the resume is clearly worse, yes, I agree. But if the resume is even remotely close, you got to go with the better team. That's my personal take on the CFP. If I was on the committee, I'd be looking at who is the best overall team, who do I think would win in a matchup right now. And again, I look at Alabama and Oregon, by the way, Tom. I actually think they're better than Washington and Florida State, regardless of the 0 or 1 losses. Like if we were putting in the best teams in the country, I'd go, I think the 5 best teams for me right now are Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, and Oregon. And I want to see more to rank them, but those are my 5 best teams currently in the country from what I've seen.
I need to see Michigan against Penn State at least before I put them in my top 5.
Okay, that's fair.
They just haven't faced anybody yet. But I think it's pretty fair to say that neither you nor I are top 5 for anybody as far as betting locks of the week go.
But we're not bottom 5 either. Over 500, baby. Come on, Tom. Give us a little love.
We're ever so slightly above 500 as coming into
over 500
this week of the show. We've got Kamen at 9-8-1, myself at 9-9.
Yeah.
So Kamen, let's go with the recap and then fly through our picks.
We're not so bad, Tom. You're selling us short. I was 2-1.
Factor in the juice. We're not profitable.
Look, man. That's why we got parlays. We have side wagers. I'm doing just all right betting this year. All right. I'm doing not great, but I'm doing just all right. Okay. I'm having a good time and it's only going to get better and better. So I was 2-1 this last week. 9-8-1 on the season, over 500. I had the Bulls and Mavericks over 223 points. The one I missed, Mavs winning 114-105, 219 points. Man, so close, so close. I had Chiefs -1.5 over the Dolphins. I was correct. Kansas City winning 21-14. It was looking like it wasn't going to be sweated at all, but I was sweating a little bit at the end of that game, if I'm being honest. Speaking of sweating, I was drenched in sweat betting on this game. You may know that I like to gamble literally online. And let's just say I put a lot of dough on the Raiders Giants under. A lot more than I would normally bet. I've been keeping my bets a little bit more responsible, as we would say.
Sure.
Not a very responsible bet this weekend for me. It was a lot of dough, and I was not looking great. Raiders and Giants under 37 points. I had it actually 37.5 and then 38 online. So the one I had on our show was 37. It actually moved 0.5 point. Then it moved 1 point later on. So I had various bets, some at 37.5, some at 38. It was 37 on the show. It was 24-0 at the halftime. It was looking horrific.
Grim.
I was about to lose a lot of money. I was about to be very, very upset. And then it all worked out. I want to give a special shout out to Antonio Pierce for saving me money and keeping me over 500 on this score. So late in the game with I think it was 40 seconds left. I don't know if you were following this closely, but what was the final score? I had written down 30-6. 36 Raiders. It's like a 4th and 4 on the 34-yard line. It's the game's over. It's 30-6, right? There's 50 seconds left. Raiders have a very good kicker, Carlson, right? Excellent kicker. You give him a 50, 55-yard kick, he'll probably make it. And I'm sitting there looking oh my God, they're kicking this field goal. I'm going to lose. What does Antonio Pierce do? The new coach of the Raiders, or the OC, whoever called the play, I loved him. I don't know who it was. 4th and 4, run play. Then the Giants get 1 or 2 plays after, clock runs out, and it's 30-6. I hit by the skin of my teeth. So this was one of the most intriguing bets I've ever made, Tom. Massive bet. I was literally in between shows at work, getting off Sundays in a couple weeks, by the way, so I'll be watching games more closely. But I was in between shows at work, and I was hitting refresh, 4th and 4. What's going on? I thought this game was going to end 10-7, by the way. I mean, these two teams are awful on offense. Defense is respectful. I actually thought I wouldn't have to sweat this one. This was the pick I felt most confident about all year, Tom. Hence why I bet a lot of money on it. Anyway, that was a very long recap, but thank you so much for the Raiders for not kicking the field goal at the end of the game and the under hitting. You were 1-2. You got the Colts -2 over the Panthers. Colts winning 27-13. This is the one pick that you made, Tom, that I did not feel good about for you. And I knew it would be wrong because I bet the opposite. Falcons -4.5 over the Vikings. The Falcons they're not it. Josh Dobbs is it, though. He came in, did a great job with no rest. Minnesota's playing some great ball.
I was anticipating Jaron Hall, the rookie, being the quarterback, and Dobbs came in and played a really competent game for somebody who just got traded to that team.
So Vikings winning outright 31-28. And then there's something about these primetime over and unders. I was thinking about tailing you. Instead, I faded you. Actually, I didn't bet on the game at all, minus the Bills, or rather the Bengals -2 is what I ended up betting, I think. But Bills, Bengals, you had over 49 points on paper. That made sense. Two great offenses, a lot of points. But NFL unders have hit more than overs this season. They've hit enough to the point that I'm betting NFL unders now, which I hate doing. And then something about the primetime games. I saw a stat and I literally was about to write it down. Then I missed it because I was at work. I had the game on in the background. I couldn't rewind, but there was some stat. I don't know if you know it off your head, but it was a stat that the unders have hit on a crazy amount of the primetime games. Almost every primetime game has hit under the total. So it was 40 or 24, 18, 42 points. You needed over 49. You are 1-2. You're 500. I'm one game over with the one push, 9-8-1. I think this week, Tom, we're both going to be over 500, and the show as a whole is going to be over 500. And next week, you'll be coming in singing a different tune, saying the entire show's over 500.
Know what we're picking.
I have a good feeling.
You have a good feeling? Well,
I feel good.
That's good for you because I don't have a great feeling going with these picks, but I'm going to anyway. All right, let's start off with an AFC North matchup. I am taking the Ravens -6.5 over the Browns. Low point total in this one. But the Ravens they're clicking on all cylinders, and we have seen the Browns scuffling on offense, especially that absolutely gross quarterback, Deshaun Watson, not playing very well earlier this season.
He might be toast as far as being a great player.
Here's hoping. Yeah. Good riddance to him and to that organization. But the Ravens won pretty handily against the Browns earlier this season, so I like them -6.5. I'll go ahead and take the Saints -2.5. This might be the game I feel best about, or the one, or well, no, this will be my second favorite one that I'm picking of the two. I know 6.5 is a fairly large number, especially in a game where the point total is over under, was at 39, 38.5, something like that. But for me, I'm going to go to the Saints -2.5. Their defense is really strong. Their offense feels like it might be starting to click a little bit more. And the Vikings, quite frankly, not an especially great team. Josh Dobbs, of course, coming in against the Falcons last week and able to put up enough for them to get the win, but probably not going to have Justin Jefferson back for the Vikings. The Saints defense is considerably better than what the Falcons defense is. And again, I think that they're just going to be able to put up enough points to have a fairly healthy win there. And then the last one, this is going to be a bit of a different sort of cover bet because I'm worried about backdoor covers and everything. And I'm worried about potential blowouts and how starters might get pulled. So I'm going to put a lock on the Cowboys and Giants, but I'm going to make it first half. The first half line is -10. Giants are running out some guy by the name of Tommy DeVito as their quarterback for this.
Danny DeVito's kid. He's not his kid. No, he's not. I was going to
say that's one heck of a graphic to put up there.
No, I'm making it up.
But we've seen the Cowboys absolutely destroy bad offenses. We saw them destroy a Giants offense earlier this season where there was Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley in a decent first drive and then blocked a field goal, and it wasn't close after that. They get to lick their chops and go after this Tommy DeVito guy. It's going to be interesting to see how the Giants play this one. They might simply play this one to not lose by too much and do a lot of running the football, a lot of milking the clock, so that spread might be pretty significant. But I think the Cowboys are going to be able to jump on it early on in the game. -10, maybe there's a backdoor cover, but with the full game line at 16.5, that's a little bit too much for my thinking. But I'm going to go Cowboys by a significant margin in the first half of this game.
Maybe you won't go over 500 this week. I don't know.
Yeah, probably not.
You probably won't. We'll see.
Probably not.
Maybe 2-1, not 3-0 though. I know that for sure because I know what your picks are.
Probably
so I'll start with the one I feel best about this week.
Sure.
Which is funny because I just bet against them last week. I'm not super high on this team, but I'm pretty low on the team they're playing. Falcons -1.5 at the Cardinals. The Cardinals are 1-8. I know they've done decently well covering big spreads, but this is a virtual pick 'em. And Josh Dobbs seems to be pretty good. What happened when Josh Dobbs didn't play? They lost 27-0 last week. I know that it's going to be Kyler Murray coming back. I know this is why. This is what the line is. I know Kyler Murray's an upgrade. I'm actually think he has a lot of potential, but this is his first week back. Think about that. And I know it's not just easy to get thrown in the fire and deliver right away. I think that, the Cardinals defense isn't great. I know the Falcons don't have a great quarterback, but I think this is a game that Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts and company, they eat, they make some plays, they make things work. Falcons win at the Cardinals. It was -1, then I saw it move to -1.5. I'll take it at 1.5 at the current moment. Bryce Young, over 217.5 pass yards against the Bears defense. This is a really, really low total. What?
I said a prop bet.
Prop bet. Yeah, I don't normally do that. The Bears are allowing 256.9 passing yards per game. That's one of the worst in the league. This total is about 40 yards less than that. So he doesn't even have to do anything crazy. Just be somewhat within what the Bears usually allow, and you'll get it. I know their defense has looked a little better in recent weeks, but I mean, the Chargers put up like 298 pass yards. So maybe it's just the Saints aren't a great passing team. The Raiders aren't a great passing team. So I don't necessarily think the secondary is all of a sudden much better. They just played a few weaker teams. But you look at their season average, 217.5 against a team that gives up 257 does not seem like a lot. I know Bryce Young has struggled. I know Carolina's offense has struggled. It's getting a little bit better overall. I know the last game was bad, but you look at the last few games, the last 4 games in particular, Tom, 247, 217, 235, and the 173 this last week. But 2 out of 4, he's hit over 217.5, and the other one he was, 1 yard away from hitting the over. So the numbers are getting a little bit better. I do think Adam Thielen is a pretty good receiving threat. It's kind of a massive, massive game for the Panthers, because if they lose this game, they give the Bears the number 1 overall pick. What Carolina has right now that very often other teams don't have in the scenario is tanking does them no good. I mean, I know they can get better picks later on in the draft, but it's not like they can tank for the first overall pick, because their first overall pick's going to the Bears. And it's in their interest to, they have a new coaching staff, a new quarterback. It's in their interest to make that system work, make that situation work. So I think they're a team that's going to be fully focused. The Bears are not good, Tom. Their defense is not good. 217.5 pass yards. I feel amazing about this bet. I really do. This is the one I feel the best about. So Bryce Young hits the over easy in this game. Maybe after 3 quarters, Tom. I guess it's a primetime game, sort of. It is actually a prime game, to be exact. So I think they unleashed the rookie, let him do the best he can, let him cook in this game. I actually didn't feel great about the line so much this week, but I'm going to go opposite you, which we haven't had recently. I'm going to go Vikings plus 2.5 against the Saints. Did you have it -2.5? What was your number?
2.5.
Yeah, so I got 2.5 as well. So Minnesota, Tom Casselman, has won 4 straight games. They've won 5 of the last 6. Their only loss was a 7-point loss to the Chiefs. So Josh Dobbs came in and got a W last week with virtually no preparation. Should be even better week 2. Minnesota's big thing is how bad is their defense. Their defense has gotten a lot better. 3 of the last 4 games, they've allowed 17 points or less. I know Kirk Cousins isn't there. I know Justin Jefferson isn't there. They won without him anyways. They're playing really good team football. I think they're 0-3, 0-4, 1-4 start was a little fluky. They lost to the Eagles. They lost to the Chiefs. I think Minnesota, I know they're up and down. They have these crazy moments. I'm not saying they're a great team, but I think they're better than the Saints. They got 2.5 points to cover. I mean, the Saints, they only got just over 200 pass yards against the Bears last week. That was a close game. The Saints almost lost against an abysmal Chicago team with their backup quarterback. I like the Vikings to win outright. You give me 2.5 points, I'm taking Minnesota. 4 straight wins, make it 5. Vikings.
Well, it'll be interesting to see us going up against each other on a wager this week.
And we
No,
can't
no,
wash either.
we
We can't,
cannot wash with a two
can't
and a half
wash.
point line, so that's
Yeah.
definitely going to be watching with rapt attention for that one. Trivia time. I think it's a pretty good one for you. As just a couple games ago, Andre Drummond grabbed his 10,000th career rebound, and he is currently playing for the Chicago Bulls. So the trivia question is this: how many other players have gotten their 10,000th rebound while also playing for the Bulls? So
I like it.
So the first clue, I mean,
is it 3?
Really obvious. I'm sorry?
3 different players?
No, it is 2 different players.
2 different players.
So can you tell me the 2 players that while they were on the Bulls grabbed their 10,000th
Dennis
career
Rodman.
rebound? Dennis Rodman indeed is one, the Hall of Famer, a multi-time champion. Can you give me the second one? This might be a little bit sneakier. Maybe.
There's 2 names I think come to mind. First, Scottie Pippen.
Not Pippen.
Jordan?
Not Jordan.
Okay.
I don't think either of them got 10,000 career rebounds.
Okay. All right, hold on. I'll come up with this. You say sneaky. Sneaky. I don't think you had that many, but it's possible. I'll just ask. It came to my head. I feel like you might be a little under, but I'll try. Joakim Noah.
Not Joakim Noah.
Okay. Do you have a clue, or is this easy, or is this hard?
I have clues that'll narrow it down for you a bit. So let's go with. So you already got Dennis Rodman. So this clue is that both players are Hall of Famers.
Ooh. Okay. Oh God. I know where Ben Wallace.
Not Ben Wallace, no.
Okay. Okay. Hall of Fame. So it's obviously not an active guy.
Mm-hmm.
Have I watched this guy play?
You have.
Okay, so it's got to be a guy that was not great with the Bulls or who was with them for a little bit. Am I right?
You're getting warmer, yeah.
Okay. By the way, Andre Drummond crossing up Chet Holmgren. That was cool. Sit down, Chet. Sit down, Rook. I know it's the second year or whatever now, but sit down.
Yeah, because I think he was just surprised that Andre Drummond even had that in his repertoire. Like, quite frankly, like you look at a guy like Andre Drummond, you're just like, how is he able to dribble like that when he has frying pans for hands?
Right.
Or not really good handles. He can manage to catch the ball.
Bill Cartwright.
Not Bill Cartwright.
He's not a Hall of Famer. Never mind. I don't know why I said that. He's not a Hall of Famer. I'm just thinking for some reason I'm thinking 90s Bulls.
Mm-hmm. So the clues that I have tie these 2 players together, and you've already gotten Dennis Rodman. So the next clue that I have for you is that both of these players are multi-time champions.
Is it? No, he's not a Hall of Famer though. He's not a Hall of Famer. I don't know, for some reason I was thinking John Sally. He's not a Hall of Famer.
No.
I mean, it's not Bill Laimbeer. He never played for the Bulls, did he? No.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-time champions.
Yep.
Did they both win championships with the Bulls, or is that giving it away or not giving it away?
No.
So the other guy did not win a championship with the Bulls.
Correct.
So he was not on the 90s Bulls. Okay.
Yeah.
Multi-time champion.
Yep.
And I've watched him play.
Yep. This last clue might be the one that gives it away, but I can go your way because I'll just give it for you. Both of these players, Dennis Rodman and this other player, have both played for the Spurs and the Lakers.
Okay, so big rebounder for the Spurs, Lakers, and Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know we didn't play on the Bulls. I just immediately I'm like Big Shot Bob, but I don't think he never played on the Bulls. Spurs, Lakers. Who was a Laker and a Spur and a Bull? I mean, Ron Harper he's too small of a guard. He never played for the Spurs anyway. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he won okay, so he would have won championships in that like 90s, 2000s ish with the Spurs and Lakers, right?
Did not win any titles with the Spurs.
All right. So he won with the Bulls. So, okay. So
No, with the
99.
not with the Bulls and not with the
No.
Spurs.
So he won multiple with the Lakers.
Yep.
Okay. So Shaq and Kobe team, probably.
No, not
Not
those title
Shaq and
teams.
Kobe team. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, duh. Pau Gasol.
Pau Gasol, one of the more underrated players
I don't.
in the NBA.
In my head, I just had like the late '90s era stuck in my
Mhm.
head, Tom. That's what was really like hurting me there. But Pau Gasol, obviously, yeah, won 2 titles with the Lakers. Then he played with the Bulls later on in his career. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, same thing with the Spurs. Past his prime with both of those stops, but yeah,
yeah,
prime Pau Gasol helping Kobe win a couple titles there.
yeah, nice. All right, my trivia for you.
Mhm.
Here's an impressive one. This is another reason to believe in the Eagles, Tom. Jalen
Hmm.
Hurts has won 12 straight games against
Mhm.
teams that enter with the winning record. That ties 2 quarterbacks in the
Mm.
history of the NFL since 1950, since 1950.
Sure.
So since 1950, there are 3 quarterbacks that have won 12 straight games
Mm.
against teams with a winning record. Jalen Hurts is one. Who are the other 2? I'm going to give you 2 clues just right off the bat. Just one
Okay.
clue that fits both players. Both of these guys played a long time in the NFL.
Okay.
So,
All right. So, I mean, the obvious ones are going to be Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning, yes. Tom Brady,
Tom
no.
Brady, no.
This other
Another
one's a lot
long
harder,
time.
but the clue is this guy played forever.
Vinny Testaverde had a long career.
How did you get Vinny Testaverde? I'm so impressed, Tom Casselman.
Just
I was
that
sure
he had
you
a
were going to
long
go.
career.
You were going to go Brett Favre. I was convinced. I had it in my head he's going to say Brady, Manning, and Favre.
Nope.
That is
No,
guaranteed.
hey, who doesn't have the pantheon when you talk about all-time great quarterbacks and winning streaks with Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Vinny Testaverde?
And Vinny Testaverde also had a ton of losses. Like, I think he had a losing record among the most losses in the history of the
Yeah.
NFL. But he had a pretty impressive streak against
Hmm.
teams with winning records from 98 to 2000. So,
Yeah. No, that's one of those names that is like it's a good trivia name to throw out. Is like, okay, he's played for a bunch of different teams. He's played for a good long career. So that's just one of those that just kind of sticks up here when you're playing Sporkle instead of studying in college type of thing.
That's the way to do it. Agreed.
All right, statement of the week. So, Kamen, as I said to you prior to the show, I'm going to give props where I don't usually give props, simply because I'm just by nature not a fan of this team.
Oh, you're
But
gonna go for the Cubs.
good
General
on the
manager.
Chicago Cubs.
I knew you were gonna go with that, and I was thinking about making it my statement, and I was just so conflicted. I know it's the right move. I know David Ross has in-game issues. I know Craig Counsell's great. I was just like, I like David Ross so much as a person. He's like the last guy left off that team, along with Kyle Hendricks, that won the World Series. So it's just a classic bittersweet moment. I could not bring myself to talk about it, even though
And that's why you
in
have
my
the
heart of hearts,
impartial.
I ultimately agree. I get it, but it's tough. It's
I
tough.
mean,
David
it is
Ross
tough.
is awesome. He's a great
is tough.
leader. He's just not the best in-game manager, but they could do worse. They probably did better in this case. Go ahead. I'll let you go.
Yeah, well, no, like
I knew you were going to talk about this because
the
you say you don't
reason-
normally go there. You're going Cubs baseball. You're a White Sox fan.
Absolutely. Well, and that even I might be becoming baseball agnostic as far as that goes, as having a favorite team. But because of that big emotional connection, that's why I do say good on the Cubs for making this sort of aggressive move, because it absolutely is bittersweet. I mean, the whole reason, or a big reason, why David Ross was given the opportunity to manage the Cubs was he was a bit of a bridge between Joe Madden managing the team the way that Joe Madden wanted to manage the team, and trying to get more out of the guys that, at the time, a good number of them were former teammates of David Ross when they won that World Series in 2016. But this is also a move where we kind of saw a bit of a plateau as far as the in-game decisions, lineup decisions went. And so for the Cubs to make this sort of move, for the Cubs to say, hey, thanks for all the memories. You've been, like you said, a wonderful teammate, a wonderful voice and leader for a team when, quite frankly, they needed that sort of thing. But making the move to get Craig Counsell going for that just really aggressive move. Like that's the word that I keep
The
coming back to.
highest paid
It's
manager of all
aggressive.
time. That's why I'm like,
Exactly.
is this like, could they got him for less? I don't. I'm a little
Well, not
conflicted
well.
about all of it
Well,
because
they needed to pay
it's
up to make him leave a rival up in the north because we look at the talent disparity and the budget disparity between the Brewers and the Cubs, and even with the Cubs being a little bit down, you look at the talent; they should be a better team than the Milwaukee Brewers, and yet the Brewers are consistently, I guess, achieving, if not a bit overachieving, with the team that they have. You take Craig Counsell, who a lot of people consider one of, if not the best managers in baseball now that Terry Francona is retiring. People look at Craig Counsell
don't
as,
forget
you know,
Bruce
just
Bochy, baby. He
Bruce
never
Bochy's definitely up
stops.
there. Absolutely.
Never
Bruce Bochy's definitely up
stops.
there. That's why I say one of, if not the greatest managers in baseball today. But you get him and you got to pay the big money to get him to come here to manage your team. And I think this is a harbinger for the Cubs spending more money for becoming the evil empire, so to speak, in the Midwest and taking advantage of the fact that Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, they're not going to be spending big bucks. St. Louis is willing to spend money, but right now they're kind of tied up with this whole Paul Goldschmidt, Wilson Contreras, Nolan Arenado. Like they're a high payroll team, but not necessarily high on talent. The Cubs now look to be making a pretty aggressive move. We'll see how in they are on Shohei Ohtani. We're going to see how in they're going to be on a lot of different free agents. So I think this is the first domino of saying, okay, we got, I guess you could say Dansby Swanson, Marcus Stroman, those were dominoes last season, over the past couple of seasons, rather.
And
But it's a
Suzuki.
big move for a team
And
that is
Bellinger.
going to hopefully start saying, well, they picked him up on a 1-year deal. We'll see if they extend
They're
him.
saying
If
that's
they
what the rumor is, that they're going to extend them.
right. So if
So,
they're
and he was
able to
really
do
good.
that, if they're able to spend that money now that they've said, okay, we've got a make good season out of you, you bounce back, time to reward you for your efforts. But yeah, it's a tough emotional move, and I always congratulate teams when it is time to make that switch and say, okay, if we really want to be serious about winning a title, we have to make the upgrade where we need to make the upgrade. So good on the Cubs for doing that sort of thing, for making that sort of move. It's especially refreshing as a White Sox fan who consistently is looking at a franchise that does the antithesis of that. So
Yeah,
hats off to the Cubs.
and just to be clear, as we see in baseball, the best team doesn't win in the playoffs very often. So for the Cubs, they were literally, a couple games away from being in the playoffs. As they say, all you need is a seat at the table with the way the modern playoff rules are, with the way the game is at the moment. You just got to get in the tournament. Even if you're the worst team in the tournament, you can still win it. I mean, the Diamondbacks, I know they have a lot of young talent. I know they have a lot of, prospective guys that will be really good for years to come. But the Diamondbacks, I know they're good in the second half of the year. They were one of the worst teams in the playoffs. They made the World Series. The Rangers, I don't want to say one of the worst, but I think they weren't the top 3 or 4 teams, and they won the whole thing. So I agree. I know. Ultimately, I agree with what you said, Tom. It is tough because David Ross is one of the most likable sports personalities ever, honestly. He wasn't a terrible manager. There were some in-game moments that he wasn't great, and that's what cost him the job. But it's not like they had a losing record and, he was awful. Maybe he wasn't great, but, he wasn't awful, and that's what makes it hard when the guy is maybe not awful, but maybe not the right guy for the job, as you said,
Exactly.
the emotional factor of things. All right, so I am kind of getting a little fed up with the NFL, Tom Casselman, and these primetime game choices. I know if they have the ability to flex some games, they don't. I'm looking at some of the primetime schedule for this specific week, and we had the Chargers and the Jets last night. The Jets, who can't score a point to save their lives, this week we have the Bears and the Panthers, who could be the two worst teams in the NFL. We've got on Sunday Night Football, we have Jets and Raiders, who, again, not very good football teams. They actually had the ability to flex this game. I think they chose to keep it. The following Sunday night, we have the Broncos and Vikings. And an upcoming Monday night, we have the Bears and Vikings. So the Bears, the Vikings, the Jets. Again, Aaron Rodgers isn't here. We've known Aaron Rodgers has been out for a while. I think Minnesota's upgrading, but Justin Jefferson, who knows when he's going to come back? Cousins isn't there. The Bears are bad. I don't know how these teams get on these primetime games. I know the Thursday games, their focus isn't as much to put the best matchup, which it should be. It's still a primetime NFL game. Like, how are these teams getting? We had a Bears and Commanders Thursday night football game earlier this year. I don't get this primetime schedule. For me, I'm going to have more time now. I'm off Sundays. Coming up in a couple of weeks, I work Sundays at my sports podcast, Selling Sports Memorabilia. So I haven't had as much of a chance to watch the games. But even when I'm going to be off, Tom, I'm a red zone guy. A lot of people are red zone guys. They want to see the scores. They want to see the best parts of drives. So it's kind of hard. I work nights as well. I have games on in the background at work Monday, Thursday. For me as a sports fan, and the way the sports culture is consumed now with the red zone, with the highlights, even with multiple games on Sunday, afternoon, 12, 3 o'clock, you're flipping channels, you're watching red zone, you're tracking your fantasy team. When's that time to sit down and watch a full entire football game? Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night football. What should be on those nights? And they had some big ones. Look, they have Eagles and Chiefs coming up Monday Night Football. We just had the Bills and the Bengals last Sunday. We had the Eagles and Dolphins. I'm not saying they always mess it up. They get it right sometimes. But we should have the premier game going on that week. The 3 premier games, at least especially Sunday and Monday Night Football. We should have the best matchups or the second or third best matchup in the NFL on the primetime window. The fact that we don't see that is really, really bad. I want to watch the best teams. I want to watch the best players. I don't want to watch the dumpster fires. So NFL, figure it out. NFL is so much about money. Part of this whole primetime deal, Amazon Prime, is for money. These Thursdays games, these international games are for money. Now, the NFL is always going to get big ratings. We know that no matter what. I get the Jets. Maybe a lot of folks may watch them, maybe. Sure. But they could get more other people, not from New York, if it's a massive, massive game. And if you want to put a team on there just to put them on there, put the Cowboys on there. Not the Jets or the Raiders, who are actually somewhat decent and still draw a crowd. So it would help boost their ratings, I think, a little bit, Tom. It would make sports fans certainly much more happy to watch. I just don't want the specific games we keep getting on the primetime window of the National Football League.
You don't think that, especially with the news that Justin Fields is going to be doubtful, so that means we're probably getting Tyson Bagent as quarterback for the Bears. You don't think that the NFL is going for it's so bad you have to watch because it's good type of situation?
I think that they were looking at this game and thinking, Justin Fields versus Bryce Young, this could have been, did the Bears make the right call type thing, which, by the way, I still think Bryce Young is going to turn out to be very good. Although the right call at this point, again, very early,
sure.
All 3 of these guys, the right call would have been C.J. Stroud. This kid is just, oh my God. C.J. Stroud is a beast. He is so good. Put that Ohio State
are you going to size
to
him
bed.
up for his jacket, or is
are
you still holding on to Bryce Young's?
I'm sizing. I'm taking it away from Bryce and sizing it up to CJ Stroud.
We're going to need some fabric. We're going to need a lot of extra fabric.
It's going to be a little bit bigger. Bryce Young's doesn't fit. So, I don't know, Tom. We could do better. I want better games on.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there. So, but again, with the whole flexing thing, I really would rather not have flexing for Thursday night football because of the massive just headache that is
Yeah,
logistically. But
I get the Thursday night flex, but the
yeah,
Sunday and Monday night flex isn't
they could
all that different.
definitely
Sunday,
they could
I
definitely
agree
get
with you.
those
You
juiced
can't
a little
flex the
bit.
Thursday night, but the Sunday and Monday night games, you could be flexing these
I
easily.
hear you. I hear you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that just about does it for us this week. Looking forward to another fun show next week. We'll be
Hmm.
talking about a Super Bowl rematch, Tom Casselman. There's a lot of stuff that can happen, but I'm guessing the lead next week is going to be the Chiefs and Eagles.
Oh
It's
yeah.
going to be so much fun to talk about. Both teams coming off a bye week. Oh man, the rematch of the Super Bowl. Andy Reid against the Eagles, the Kelsey brothers, Taylor Swift. Is she a
Oh
Philly
good
girl? Is she a
heavens.
KC girl?
Oh
Oh,
good
I think
heavens.
she'll be out on her tour though, Tom. So don't worry. But it's going to be now. That's a game on Monday night that the NFL got very, very right. It could be
Hmm.
a Super Bowl preview, a Super Bowl rematch. We haven't had that in a while. So I'm
Hmm.
excited to talk about the Chiefs and Eagles. It's going to be juicy. All right, Tom. Thanks so much on a great show. I will see you next week. Looking forward to that. Thank you to all the listeners, all the viewers. You guys are great. And have a good day, Tom, and everyone else.